I'm Ivy Calder, 29, daughter of lawyers, sister of a celebrated surgeon, and according to every whispered brunch conversation, the family embarrassment. I teach art at Magnolia High. I own 3 pairs of paint-splattered jeans, 1 reliable pickup, and a dog-eared library card. Worst of all, I married Mason Ruiz, 31, a bridge welder who still smells faintly of diesel no matter how long he showers. Mom calls him blue-collar the way people label food past its expiration date. Saturday afternoon, the summons arrived. Family dinner tonight, formal. I pictured Mom polishing Crystal, Dad decanting a 14-year Scotch Blair, arranging favors that matched her manicure. The message didn't say, "Bring Mason," but I was done editing him out of my life. He found me in the driveway, loading a coconut cream pie into the cooler like it contained state secrets. "Battle plan," he asked, pushing sunglasses onto his head. "Smile, breathe." Escape before the passive aggression turns active. His laugh rolled across the neighborhood like warm thunder. "Got your back, Carino." He kissed my cheek, tasting sunlight and cinnamon gum, then started the truck. The drive across Houston took 30 minutes, enough time for doubts to cling like humidity. The Calder estate sat on a gated cul-de-sac where every mailbox gleamed. SUVs with dealership plates lined the curb. Aunt Rita's Tesla glistened midnight blue. Blair's silver Audi flaunted the vanity tag BLRS MD. Grandpa's vintage Mustang, Dad's newest restoration project, rested under a silk cover like a prized relic. Our Ford dull red coughed once as Mason parked. I studied the house, white stucco, black shutters, a columned porch wide enough for a political announcement. Mason whistled. "If columns get any bigger, they'll file for their own zip code." "Shh," I teased. "The statues have ears." He offered his arm, gentlemanly and irreverent. Together, we climbed the steps. Mom opened the door before we knocked. Her perfume wafted out gardenias soaked in ambition. I received a half hug and a cheek air kiss while she glamored a smile. Her eyes flicked to Mason's blazer, not designer, and to his polished boots, definitely practical. "Ivy, sweetheart, you look comfortable," she said. "Mason," a nod cordial as a weather report. We crossed the foyer, marble cold under our shoes. Crystal chandeliers scattered diamonds across the walls. The living room buzzed Blair, reenacting surgery triumphs for 2 anesthesiologists. Cousin Will explaining cryptocurrency to an aunt who thought Bitcoin was an exercise bike. Conversation faltered the instant Mason and I stepped in like a record scratch at a symphony. Then the volume rose again, just high enough to hide the judgment. Dad strode over, scotch swirling in hand. His handshake with Mason was firm, but the second-long pause telegraphed dominance. "Good to see you, son. Staying busy at the yard?" "Bridge site, sir," Mason corrected gently. "East Belt expansion." Dad chuckled as though concrete and steel were quaint hobbies. "Ah, yes. Important. Foundations." My grip tightened on the pie tin until foil crinkled. Mason's eyes caught mine, steady, reassuring. We followed Blair's laughter to the dining room, where name cards waited like scorecards. Dr. Blair Calder and guest, shown in gold cursive. Mine read Ivy Calder plus guest plus not husband. I slid it aside and placed our pie near the imported macarons. Blair swept over in a sapphire sheath dress that said yacht more than dinner. "Sis," she sang, cheekbone kissing the air. "Love your earthy vibe." Her gaze skimmed Mason. "Mason, any chance you could peek at Dad's generator later?" "It whines." Mason smiled politely. "Happy to give advice. Sounds like the alternator belt." "See," Blair chirped. "Handy and adorable." She floated away before sarcasm could curdle. We assembled in the conservatory, a glass cathedral of orchids and string lights. The table stretched beneath a canopy of Edison bulbs, shimmer of silverware portraits of ancestors glaring from oil-painted frames. Mom herded guests to assigned seats, subtle choreography, ensuring Mason and I were anchored at the far end near the patio doors, equidistant from the center of conversation. Salads arrived frisée with champagne vinaigrette. Blair described a Johns Hopkins fellowship. Dad congratulated her voice, proud yet measured like a stockholder report. When I tried to mention my student's mural unveiling, Mom shifted topics to European river cruises. Mason listened, nodding, occasionally, slipping his hand to my knee. Each touch said, "You matter, even here." His calm slowed my heartbeat. Entrée sea basse with lemon beurre blanc. Wine refilled. Laughter grew lubricated. Then Mom lifted her glass eyes, glinting. Ivy, darling, remind me, how many applications did you submit after undergrad? You were aiming for our ISD, weren't you? Imagine where you'd be if you'd kept at it. She smiled all butter knife. Silence thinned. Forks paused. The subtext was clear. Imagine if you hadn't married him. Before I could frame a response, Dad placed his glass down with courtroom drama. Your mother's right. Your talent could have been cultivated, but you chose differently. His gaze slid to Mason. I just hope you realize potential wasted is a family tragedy. Heat flared under my collar, but I swallowed it with sang-froid. Mason leaned closer. Whisper soft. Remember the plan, let me weather it. He dabbed his lips, rose from his chair, and surveyed the table with Welder steady posture. Mr. Calder, he began, voice low enough to make guests lean in. I value potential as well. That's why I invest in it. He produced several folded documents from his jacket pocket, smoothing them across the linen. Invoices, thank you letters, anonymous repair receipts. I've done work for this household and never billed a cent. Mom's pearl bracelet clinked. What is this? Mason gestured to dates and signatures. Last winter burst pipe under the wine cellar. Plumber couldn't reach the corroded beam. I reinforced it overnight so your Barolos didn't swim. He pointed at another line. Electrical fault in the lake house guest wing, fixed before the holiday reunion, no charge. He nodded toward Blair. When your Lexus died on I-5 roadside dispatch, said the tow fee was covered. That was me, Dr. Calder. Blair's mouth opened fish-like. A single drop of Cabernet slid down her stemware and pooled manically at the base. Cousin Will muttered, dude. Aunt Rita's fork froze mid-bite. Mason's tone stayed gentle. I wasn't hiding, just serving. Because Ivy loves her family. The chandelier's reflection quivered in Mom's wine. Dad's jaw flexed alongside a vein near his temple. But the room remained wordless, everyone recalibrating their hierarchy. My lungs expanded with a new delicious air. Years of shrugged comments, jokes about my paycheck eye rolls at my thrift store dresses. All those microcuts began knitting over. Mason saw it and smiled, just for me a private sunrise. Dad broke first. You think charity buys respect? He asked, voice gravelly. Mason shook his head. Respect isn't for sale, but maybe recognition is due. I rose beside him, heart thumping but steady. Dad, Mom, I've let this narrative play too long me as disappointment. Mason is albatross. My voice wobbled, but I gripped truth. I'm proud of my husband, proud of my students, proud I didn't trade integrity for prestige. Mom's lips parted, outrage forming. I lifted a palm. No drama tonight, I promised. I turned to guests. Enjoy dessert. Mason squeezed my elbow, nodding toward the patio. We stepped into night air suite with honeysuckle. Behind glass, silhouettes fluttered like startled birds. The evening sky was indigo, distant thunder mumbling. Houston humidity hugged us, but felt less suffocating than the conservatory ever had. Ready, he asked. For what? To choose whether we walk away or walk back in and finish the story on our terms. I inhaled. The house glowed warm, yet the warmth wasn't for me. Outside, the cicadas sang an anthem of stubborn survival. One more round, I said. I won't let them rewrite the ending. We re-entered amid coffee service. Blair powdered her nose, pretending nothing happened. Dad conversed with Uncle Theo about real estate downturns. Mom reorganized silver spoons with surgical focus. But tension coiled like a sleeping snake. I took my seat. Mason remained standing, every head swiveled again. Apologies, he said, tone courteous. One final note, Ivy's student mural. The unveiling funds were short. She didn't ask, but I topped it up because art belongs to everybody. He bowed slightly, then sat. A hush hugged the room before Cousin Emma broke it with a nervous laugh, asking about the Astros. Conversation limped forward. Cutlery clinked. But respect, real respect, rested heavier than the china. Mom leaned over, whisper and frost. You brought a welder's ledger to a family dinner. I looked her in the eye. Consider it a mirror. She straightened cheeks blotched with color, unsure whether it was anger or shame. Dessert arrived. The coconut cream pie, our humble contribution, was the first dish to empty. Mason served slices, smiling at incredulous relatives who murmured compliments they never meant to offer. As plates cleared, thunder cracked outside. The power flickered. Blair gasped. Aunt Rita clutched pearls. Light steadied, but unease lingered. In that flicker, I glimpsed the family without its veneer, just people fragile and flawed, terrified their ladder might be leaning on the wrong wall. Dad pushed back his chair. "We'll reconvene in the parlor," he announced, voice brittle. "Translation damage control meeting." I rose too. We actually have an early morning. My students meet at the mural site at 7. We'll slip out. Aunt Rita offered a perfunctory hug smelling of Chanel and strain. Blair avoided eye contact. Dad's handshake with Mason held a grudging strength, like clinging to an old script. Mom followed us to the porch. Rain began soft as whispers. "Stay a minute," she pleaded, mascara smudging. "Your father didn't mean—" "Mom," I said, marshaling gentleness. I know exactly what he meant. "You all did." She opened, then closed her mouth, a gate stuck between apology and pride. Lightning illuminated the yard, casting our truck's dents in silver. Mason unlocked the passenger door, umbrella ready. I stepped onto the porch's edge, facing Mom. "I love this family," I began. "But love without respect is just nostalgia." I kissed her cheek, the softest goodbye I could craft, and hurried down the steps before my resolve dissolved. Inside the truck engine, rumbling windshield wipers batting rain. Mason asked regrets. "Only that I waited this long," I said. He reached across interlacing fingers with mine grease in his fingerprints chalk, in mine evidence of lives that build bridges and paint dreams. The house behind us shrank in the side mirror until its lights blurred with rain. Ahead, the highway glistened every reflector, a small promise that we were moving forward. And that, reader, is where the first chapter ends. The storm hasn't broken yet. In part 2, you'll see what happens when a forged signature, a crumbling trust, and one well-timed truth detonate the Calder dynasty from within. Buckle up, the weld's about to spark. I woke the next morning to humid dawn light and Mason's slow breathing beside me. But the thunderstorm inside my skull hadn't cleared. Every lightning flash of memory, Mom's pin-sharp smirk, Dad's Scotch-heavy lecture, the hush that fell when Mason unfurled those invoices kept looping until my chest felt raw. My phone buzzed at 7:03 a.m. The mural crew needed paint, so I left Mason sleeping, drove to the hardware store, and let the scent of Premier steady me. Halfway down the aisle, a call from an unfamiliar 800 number pinged. A polite banker asked if Ivy Ruiz still intended to proceed with a $150,000 equity loan against her trust. My pulse tripped. I told him I'd get back to him, hung up, and stared at a display of cobalt tubes, the color suddenly looking poisonous. By noon, the students were sketching sunflowers on brick, but my mind painted darker lines. My parents must have forged my consent, counting on me to stay soft-spoken. At lunch, I asked Mia, one of my seniors, whose mom Keisha worked in county records, to find out whether any Calder properties had new liens. An hour later, Keisha texted a photo of a freshly filed deed of trust bearing my shaky imitation signature. Rage came in a cool, clinical wave. I wasn't trembling, I was cataloging. After school, I stopped by Mason's shop, where sparks rained amber around him. I told him everything over the clang of steel, and his eyes hardened like quenched metal. "We need proof," he said simply. So that night, while Dad hosted a charity Zoom about ethical leadership, I slipped into my childhood home, using the keypad code that hadn't changed since I was 13. The marble foyer echoed like a mausoleum. In Dad's study, I located a locked cherry box that once held rare cufflinks. Now it housed a thumb drive and a banker's folder. I photographed every page loan application's transfer requests, power of attorney drafts, all bearing my puppet signature. Footsteps creaked upstairs. I pocketed the drive, slid out a side door, and my heart didn't slow until the pickup doors clicked shut. Back home, Mason copied files to 3 cloud vaults and handed me a battered audio recorder. Tomorrow, we let them talk themselves into a corner. The opportunity came quicker than planned. At dawn, Mom texted an invitation, thinly disguised demand for Sunday brunch to clear the air. I agreed, but first I visited Uncle Silas' dad's older brother, a tax attorney obsessed with legacy. Over coffee in his book-lined den, I laid out the documents. The color drained from his face faster than cream into his mug. Silas hated scandal, especially the type that could sink Calder and Calder LLP. He promised quiet support and crucially access to the family's accountant, Mr. Hargrove, who'd been noticing irregularities. Sunday arrived sweltering. Mason dropped me at Society Cafe, but lingered in the parking lot phone ready. Inside, the air conditioning blasted artificial autumn, while violins drifted from hidden speakers. Mom, Dad Blair, and my brother Pierce sat at a corner table set with mimosa flutes no one had sipped. Their smiles belonged to a press release. I clicked the recorder on inside my purse, sat and waited. Dad began a rehearsed monologue about protecting naive family members from predatory lenders and slid a stack of papers toward me, a retroactive consent form. Mom dabbed non-existent tears. Blair studied her manicure, though her eyes glittered with schadenfreude. Pierce, recently jobless, avoided my gaze. I asked Dad, sweet as syrup, why the loan proceeds were already routed to his private account if it was to protect me. He stuttered the first crack in his courtroom armor. I then mentioned the bank's fraud department and Silas's curiosity. Blair's glass clinked against her plate. Dad leaned in, lowering his voice to a hiss. Unaware the recorder nestled inches away, sign. Now in this stays family business. That sentence was my checkmate. I rose, thanked the room for brunch, and walked out, leaving the documents untouched. Outside, Mason pulled up. I slid in and told him we had the confession. Monday spiraled fast. Silas convened a family emergency conference in the Calder Mansion's marble hall. Present, Mom and Dad looking sleep-starved, Blair in a power suit, Pierce in yesterday's hoodie, Silas flanked by Mr. Hargrove, Mason and me side by side. A court reporter-style mic recorded every word. Silas opened with the forged signature evidence, then played Dad's brunch threat. Mom gasped. Blair's composure fractured. Pierce muttered a curse. Dad tried bluster. Claimed I'd authorized verbally, but Mason produced phone logs, proving I'd been teaching during each bank meeting. When that failed, Dad pivoted to Martyrdom Ivy, we saved you from drowning in debt. I told him my only debt was the moral one he now owed me. Silas declared the trust frozen pending audit. Mr. Hargrove recommended law enforcement notification. Dad's face caved in on itself. In the hush that followed, I felt both lighter and sadder. This was still my family, yet they'd sold pieces of me like spare furniture. Mom reached for my hand, but found air. I announced my terms, public apology restitution, with interest paid from Dad's personal account. Blair to retract every dinner party insult about my marriage, Pierce, to repay the secret loans he'd siphoned from my trust and family counseling if they ever wanted to see me again. Shock rippled through the hall. Yet Silas nodded understanding that without me, the Calder image would rot. He persuaded them. Papers were signed, notarized, dated. It was surreal how quickly a dynasty could buckle when its scapegoat refused the role. Mason and I left hand in hand. On the porch, Blair caught up tears streaking mascara. She apologized genuinely, saying the family machine chewed everyone eventually. I told her redemption wasn't a speech but a pattern. We'd see. Driving away, Houston's skyline glimmered in late sun, and I realized I felt taller, as though setting boundaries had added vertebrae. That night, Mason grilled street corn in our tiny yard. We ate on paint-spattered stools, laughing at the absurdity of defeating a family empire with a welder's ethics and an art teacher's refusal to bow. But victory wasn't the end. Ripples kept traveling. Tuesday, local legal blogs leaked rumors of forged documents at Calder & Calder. Dad stepped down temporarily. Mom closed her social media. Students asked why I seemed brighter. I told them art reveals truth, even messy truth. By Friday, the mural Sunflowers and Bridges Intertwined was finished, and the mayor's office tweeted our photo. I tagged Mason, adding Bridges hold when welders care. He replied with a heart and a line of Neruda. Week's end, a certified letter arrived. Dad offering heartfelt remorse, citing sleepless nights and therapy appointments scheduled. I believed parts doubted others, but healing wasn't a toggle. It was a weld apply heat, add filler cool slow. Monday sunrise spilled copper light over Magnolia High's courtyard, catching the fresh Sunflower Bridge mural and turning dew into sparks. I stood there alone, Mason's hoodie draped over my shoulders, rereading Dad's certified letter for the 5th time. He wrote about insomnia and a therapist who said guilt was rust that crept unless ground away. I wanted to believe him, yet the memory of his hissed ultimatum still rang like dropped glass. I folded the letter, once slipped it into my sketchbook, and walked inside to face a different storm. Principal Gomez waited in my classroom with 2 school board members and a budget spreadsheet. They needed a safe new pedestrian overpass between the student parking lot and the stadium. Bids were astronomical. Without thinking, I said, "My husband welds bridges. Let's price integrity instead of marble lobbies." The board blinked, intrigued. By lunch, Mason arrived in work boots, unfolded blueprints on the art tables, and explained load paths with chalk, while my juniors watched wide-eyed. The collaboration felt like breathing after rain. That evening, a local reporter named Nia Reynolds knocked on our door, drawn by the mural tweet and swirling rumors about Calder's forged documents. In our kitchen, she balanced a recorder between the coffee maker and Mason's helmet, asking how it felt to topple a dynasty with ethics. I corrected her. I didn't topple anything. Gravity caught what was already falling. The article hit Wednesday, framing me as whistleblower teacher against white-collar greed. Social media lit up. Donations for art supplies flooded in, but so did trolls blaming me for dismantling a respected firm. My phone pinged like a fire alarm. That night, Mom called voice small, asking if I'd agreed to an interview about the family. When I said yes, she sighed, as though I'd tightened her corset. "Your father can't show his face at the club," she whispered. I pictured the club's velvet chairs and thought maybe sunlight finally reached that cave. Thursday brought a new twist. Pierce rang my doorbell at dawn, unshaven, eyes red. He'd been pulled aside by federal investigators, probing insider trading tied to a medical supply company Blair's fiancé managed. Documents traced back to Pierce's laptop, another shortcut gone bad. He begged me to stall the press, arguing I owed family unity. The irony tasted metallic. I didn't slam the door. Instead, I gave him black coffee, and hard truth accountability is the only solvent for shame. He left angry but sobered. At school, the Overpass project gained momentum. Students fused art and engineering sketching panels of welded blossoms along railings. Mason supervised welds after class, and the shop smelled like ozone and creativity. Children who once thought trades were fallback options now argued arc angles and tensile strength. I felt my father's old words potential wasted. Is a tragedy morphing into a new thesis potential ignored as worse? Friday afternoon yielded another certified envelope, this time from Silas. Inside lay settlement confirmation, restitution, transferred public apology, drafted counseling scheduled. My chest loosened a notch. But there was a handwritten note too. Dad requested a private meeting at grandfather's old ranch neutral ground, away from marble judgment. Mason worried it was a trap. I sensed it was confession. Saturday sunrise found me driving west cattle fields, rolling under honeyed light. The ranch house sagged but smelled of cedar, and memories summers chasing fireflies. Grandpa teaching us to sand barn doors smooth as river stones. Dad waited on the porch in rolled sleeves. No scotch, just black coffee. We sat on steps where paint peeled like old defenses. He began slowly describing how Grandpa's rigid perfectionism forged him. Praise was rationed. Failure punished with silence. I vowed my children would be exceptional, he said, voice fraying. But I confused achievement with worth. He admitted forging my signature felt justified in a panic Pierce's debts. Blair's looming wedding caused a downturn in client retainers. But the moment the pen left paper, he felt something die. He apologized without qualifiers, tears streaking sun-leathered cheeks. I listened, anger thawing into complicated ache. I told him forgiveness wasn't a verdict, it was a practice. We agreed on boundaries, transparency therapy attendance, and autonomy for me. I left the ranch lighter, although scars still itched. Sunday evening, a rainbow arced over Houston after a quick rain. Mason and I hosted a backyard barbecue for mural students, Gomez, Silas, even Blair, who arrived alone, engagement ring missing. She pulled me aside, admitting she'd cut ties with her fiancé after learning of the insider scheme. "I mocked your choices because they scared me," she said. "You lived without a safety net, and I was drowning in one." We hugged, naughty but real. Over plates of grilled corn, the students unveiled a 3D model, of the overpass sunflowers laser-cut in steel LED lights powered by solar panels' beauty-serving function. The board approved funding the next week, hiring masons crew under union rates, crediting students as junior designers. News outlets pivoted from scandal to innovation story, welded bridges and painted dreams. How a teacher and a tradesman reinvented campus safety. Meanwhile, Calder & Calder rebranded Dad, stepping back while Silas instituted ethics training, pro bono clinics, and a scholarship in my name for students entering the trades. Trolls went quiet as facts outshouted rumors. One crisp October morning, Principal Gomez announced the city would honor the mural team at a council session. Dad asked if he could attend. I said yes, provided he sat in the crowd, not on stage. He did. When the mayor handed me a plaque, I caught Dad's eyes, moist, humble, and felt something mend. Pierce, still under investigation, but cooperating, volunteered to help Mason's apprentices learning honest work with hands that once typed shortcuts. Blair enrolled in a public health program using her medical skills for underserved clinics. Mom surprised everyone by starting an adult literacy volunteer group, perhaps chasing grace. None of it erased what happened. But like Mason often said, a weld's strength comes from the joint's scars. Winter settled soft over Houston. On New Year's Eve, Mason and I unlocked the doors of our new nonprofit space, Calder Ruiz Forge and Studio, half welding bay, half art workshop funded by city grants, and my returned trust. We toasted with Mexican hot chocolate, watching teenagers file in, wide-eyed, some carrying sketch pads, others steel-toe boots. As midnight fireworks bloomed, I thought about legacy, not the brittle monument my parents once prized, but the living bridge we were building strong enough for new stories to cross. And somewhere in the night, my phone buzzed. Dad's therapist sent an update he hadn't missed a session. I smiled, tucked the phone away, and greeted the first student of the new year. Potential wasn't wasted. It had been waiting like metal for the right heat to shine. Spring crept into Houston on cat paws, warm breezes weaving through live oak canopies, while pollen dusted everything the color of muted gold. And inside the Calder Ruiz Forge and Studio, the air buzzed with grinders' laughter, and the kind of hope that smells faintly of hot steel and tempera paint. 2 months had passed since the New Year launch, and the place already felt alive. Teens bivouacked at workstations drafting kinetic sculptures, veterans retraining on TIG welders, even retirees brushing rust off dormant creativity. City Hall's pedestrian overpass contract had become our flagship, the structure rising in sections behind the school stadium like an iron flower, each girder etched with student-designed sunflower motifs that shimmered whenever sunrise hit fresh powder coat. Mason managed field welds while I juggled lesson plans and grant paperwork. And most nights, we compared splatterburns with ink stains over tortillas at the shop's communal table. Life felt stitched right, yet cracks formed where success rubbed against old fault lines. One April morning, a certified envelope slid under our door, an anonymous complaint to the state contracting board, alleging bid rigging on the overpass. The accusation read like a thriller: insider collusion, kickbacks paid in art grants, nepotism disguised as community outreach. My stomach dropped. The ink carried the formal chill of someone who understood legal levers. Mason raised an eyebrow, reasoning that our numbers were public audits clean, but I recognized the cadence of Calder-style warfare. I called Silas, who admitted a rival firm, Lanier Infrastructure, had partnered with Dad's former golf buddy. Losing the bid cost them millions. Silas suspected they were fishing for leverage to discredit us and maybe redeem Dad's standing. I believed Dad wouldn't stoop again yet. Golf buddy ego could weaponize nostalgia. The board froze reimbursements pending review. Without cash flow, the studio's training stipend would evaporate in 4 weeks. Tension spread like hairline fractures. Apprentices worried about paychecks. Students feared their art would be scrapped. Mason's crew debated jumping ship to steadier projects. I lay awake nights hearing phantom clinks of metal hitting shop floors that might soon be silent. One dawn, while fog curled over Buffalo Bayou, Dad knocked on our loft door, no chauffeur, just him in windbreaker and jeans. He looked older, less lacquered, carrying a manila folder. Over coffee, he swore he hadn't orchestrated the complaint, pulling out emails he'd intercepted Lanier's VP to the golf buddy, bragging that torpedoing the welder teacher circus would make room for a proper construction powerhouse. Dad said he'd testify if needed, proving the complaint malicious. I searched his face for performance, but saw only worn conviction. Still, pride made me ask why he cared. He inhaled like welding gas stung his lungs. Because I finally grasped that legacy isn't walls of diplomas. It's bridges no one sees falling. I toppled yours once. I won't stand by again. His voice cracked. I nodded a cautious weld mending. Mason arranged a meeting with the contracting board. We assembled evidence-transparent bids, time-stamped communications, independent engineer endorsements, and Dad's forwarded emails. Students filmed a documentary showing every step from design charrette to poor day narrating budgets with teenager bluntness. At the hearing a week later, board members watched footage of 15-year-old Joelle explaining load calculations while painting petals. And something shifted. The project stopped being numbers on invoices and became civic inspiration. Lanier's attorney tried spinning nepotism, but Dad took the microphone, admitted past failures in painful detail, and declared that using Ivy or Mason's project for leverage was a betrayal disguised as business. His candor stunned even me. The board voted unanimously to dismiss the complaint and reprimand Lanier. Reimbursements resumed, plus a press release praising imaginative infrastructure. Victory tasted different this round, less adrenaline, more measured relief, like stepping onto firm ground after wobbling across rebar. Yet consequences rippled. Journalists dug into Lanier's bid history. Corruption charges surfaced, and Dad's testimony, though heroic, cost him invitations to old guard social circles. He seemed lighter, freed from clubs' mahogany cages. But Mom wrestled with their exile. She missed charity luncheons where gossip glittered. I invited her to the studio's Saturday open house. She arrived in sneakers and linen, hesitant yet curious, and left hours later paint-smudged after helping a 7-year-old weld a tiny garden stake. She confessed on the ride home she hadn't felt useful in decades. Slowly, the studio became her haunt. She cataloged donations, brewed coffee for vets, learned MIG basics, and let pearl earrings rest in jewelry boxes. Meanwhile, Blair's public health internship at a mobile clinic exposed her to neighborhoods forgotten by big hospitals. She asked if our students could design signage for vaccination drives. They said yes, forging laser-cut panels depicting hearts beating inside gears. Even Pierce, finishing community service hours for his security's snafu, volunteered night shifts, crunching inventory spreadsheets no one else understood. One sticky May afternoon, the overpass's final segment was ready to hoist. The whole city seemed to gather, students in paint-splattered hoodies, welders in reflective vests, Gomez with a megaphone, Silas filming from a drone. Mason directed cranes, his voice calm lightning. I stood on bleachers, clutching the inaugural sunflower plaque, while Dad held Mom's hand behind me. As the segment settled, the welders' torches kissed steel sparks cascading like amber rain. The crowd hushed, feeling history fuse. Suddenly, a thunderclap split the air. Storm clouds barreled in gulf. Moisture turning afternoon into night. Wind whipped banners. Bolts cracked nearby power poles. Safety protocol demanded evacuation until lightning cleared. We herded students back to buses, but Joelle tugged my sleeve. Her younger brother, with cerebral palsy, was stranded inside the stadium restrooms, frightened by the dark. The main gates were locked, keyholder already off-site, storm intensifying. Mason radioed that climbing scaffolds in this weather risked electrocution. I pictured the boy alone under flickering emergency lights, and impulse overruled caution. I sprinted toward the stadium tunnel, Dad surprisingly matching my pace despite rain slicking steps. He grabbed the bolt cutter from a maintenance shed, old tennis elbow be damned, and together we snapped the chain. Inside, echoes bounced. We found the child huddled near concession stands. He flinched at thunder, but smiled when Dad knelt offering a piggyback. We emerged soaked, yet triumphant, just as lightning ceased. Applause rising from volunteers sheltered under awnings. In that downpour, I saw renewed family bonds forged not by grand gestures, but by small, brave acts, repeated until trust hardened. 2 days later, the overpass officially opened. Mayor Ortiz cut ribbon. Drones captured mosaic railings glinting like stained glass. Newspapers headlined art trade and tenacity span Bayside High. Donations flooded further. The city requested proposals for 3 more community bridges. Calder Ruiz Studio transformed into a model where art students gained trade credentials and apprentices earned humanities credit blending worlds once siloed. The nonprofit's board diversified Gomez's mom, a union rep Blair, a student alum, and yes, Pierce overseeing digital transparency, so nobody could ever forge in shadow again. Late June at an outdoor gala under lantern-strung oaks, Dad presented the first Calder Tools and Brushes scholarship to Joelle, whose sunflower design ignited everything. She cried. He cried. Even the mosquitoes seemed to pause. On the drive home, Mason whispered that healing looked messy but beautiful, like slag chipped off a perfect weld. I agreed, resting my head on his shoulder, while the truck rattled down streets that now traced a map of bridges, physical and invisible, we had learned to build. July's wet heat draped Houston in a haze that turned distant skyscrapers into smudged charcoal. And inside the forge fans whirred, while welders stitched orange arcs across new commissions. I was cataloging donations when an email subject stung like a Hornet acquisition proposal, HorizonWorks and Elevate Fund. HorizonWorks was a national infrastructure conglomerate, famous for glossy commercials featuring drones swooping over smart bridges. Elevate Fund was its philanthropic wing, a velvet glove hiding a granite fist. Their CEO, Nash Granger, requested a meeting at our studio to discuss exponential impact. I forwarded it to the board heartbeat skipping between pride and foreboding. 2 weeks later, Granger arrived in a driverless SUV, stepping onto the dusty lot, wearing sneakers whiter than primer. He shook Mason's leather-gloved hand without flinching at grime, then praised our overpass stats, accident reduction, community engagement, social media reach. He spoke fluent metrics, sliding a tablet across our workbench. $75 million for Calder Ruiz assets, plus lifetime consultancy roles for Mason and me, plus promises of scaling our Art Plus trade model nationwide. The numbers dazzled volunteers. You could almost hear eyeballs turning to coins. Pierce, ever the data hawk, whispered that $75 million could bankroll 10 studios. Mom blinked tears of relief, picturing sustainable funding without bake sales. Even Gomez, champion of grassroots, asked if resisting growth equaled selfishness. Mason remained silent, arms crossed like a welded cross brace. I asked Granger what HorizonWorks envisioned for our current site. He smiled, politician smooth, mixed-use innovation campus makers labs, artisanal eateries, lofts for influencers. I pictured rent spikes forcing mural kids from their apartments, sunflower railings overshadowed by latte terraces. I thanked him and requested a week. That night, Mason and I sat on the shop roof legs, dangling over sheet metal gutters. City lights pulsing beyond the bayou. The air smelled of honeysuckle and hot steel. He said growth sounds noble, but scale often shreds soul. I confessed the offer tempted me because security felt safer. Now that 2 pink lines glowed on a stick in my pocket. Yes, life sparked inside me, tiny as filament. And fear of failing, that future, fluttered louder than any troll online. Mason's eyes widened, then softened into sunrise. He rested his palm on my flat abdomen, whispering Spanish lullabies to cells that hadn't formed ears. We decided nothing that night, just listened to cicadas writing symphonies. Over the next days, the board fractured along fault lines old and new. Pierce argued the buyout would guarantee transparency budgets, citing SEC filings. Blair countered with public health stats linking gentrification to clinic closures. Mom, once pearl-chained, but now MIG-confident, voiced worry about union clauses. HorizonWorks hired non-union labor abroad, despite green branding. Students staged a debate. Joelle asked if art born in classrooms would survive inside corporate spreadsheets. Data versus dignity tangoed across every meeting. I drafted pros and cons until ink ran dry, but answers hid like weld defects beneath slag. Thursday before the vote, Silas requested a private lunch. He revealed HorizonWorks faced debt loads after 2 overseas acquisitions. Elevate Fund's offer hinged on flipping our land to a luxury developer named Baystar, who planned waterfront condos. Clause 16B allowed HorizonWorks to reallocate underperforming assets within 5 years. He slid over due diligence files. Baystar's projects routinely displaced small businesses, and a lobbyist push aimed to rezone our district. My stomach iced over. The deal wasn't philanthropy, it was gentrification draped in sunflowers. That evening, I studied the files while Mason welded late. Lightning popped beyond clouds. Sparks mirrored skyfire. I realized Horizon Works had underestimated high school art nerds who built bridges. We needed evidence in daylight. Friday dawned thick and electric. Blair, now versed in community medicine, accompanied me to City Records, where we scanned rezoning petitions bearing Horizon Works subsidiaries masked as LLCs. Meanwhile, Mom marshaled retirees to sift minutes from zoning hearings. Pierce guilt-pricked hacked publicly available SE annexes showing Horizon Works executive stock options tied to property divestment. By nightfall, we had a mosaic of greed. We could expose it, but a scandal might still tank our studio if Horizon Works sued for defamation. Mason suggested forging our ethos into a counter-proposal. Keep ownership, invite Horizon Works to license curricula, but retain land under a nonprofit trust and mandate union labor. Risky, Granger might walk, but power balanced on public narrative. Saturday, we convened an emergency town hall in the forge lanterns hanging from gantries fans pushing humid air. Students, welders, neighbors packed the bay. I stepped onto a crate, heart hammering like a rivet gun, and revealed pregnancy first because this story was about stakes human, not monetary. Gasps melted into cheers. Then I detailed Horizon Works' offer, pausing before exposing the rezoning trap. Murmurs swelled into outrage. Joelle shouted that sunflowers don't bloom in marble lobbies. Dad, standing beside Mom, raised a hand not to silence, but to testify. He recounted forging signatures and how truth welded his redemption. The crowd quieted, hearing a cautionary echo. He finished. Legacy is what survives scrutiny. The room thundered agreement. We drafted a resolution on a welding table, reject any acquisition lacking land trust protections. Insist on union contracts. Guarantee community ownership of future designs, and publish all negotiations online. The vote voice and raised welding masks was unanimous. Monday morning, we met Granger in our conference nook, streaming live on the studio's channel. He arrived confident, but when Mason slid the resolution across steel and cameras panned to watchers, council members, reporters, thousands of subscribers, his smile shrank. I thanked him again, praised his vision, then cited clauses and rezoning schemes. He denied knowledge. Pierce clicked a link projecting SEC annexes on the wall. Granger's lawyer tried to cut feed. Mom, savvy with cables, now rerouted audio. Viewers flooded comments. Granger requested recess. I offered partnership under our terms. He whispered with counsel eyes darting to lenses, understanding he'd been out-narrated. Finally, he straightened, voice brittle Horizon. Works withdraws the acquisition, but proposes a curriculum alliance, no land transfer needed. Applause ricocheted off I-beams. We accepted handshake captured in welding helmet reflection. Horizon Works PR spun the pivot as community empowerment. Our studio gained licensing royalties without selling soul. Baystar's rezoning petition evaporated under city scrutiny. Weeks later, Elevate Fund wired $3 million for scholarships, no strings, while union chapters secured training contracts. The studio expanded into an adjacent warehouse owned by the new land trust rents, capped for artisans. Summer's end, we hosted a festival on the completed overpass food trucks, pop-up galleries, live welding demos under floodlights. Mayor Ortiz cut another ribbon this one for policy safeguarding cultural zones. As fireworks etched the night, Mason rested a hand on my rounding belly sparks reflecting in his goggles. Dad grilled queso asadero alongside apprentices. Mom taught kids to bead sunflower bracelets. Blair administered free checkups. Pierce live-streamed the concert with open-source software he'd coded. Joelle, college-bound on the Tools and Brushes Scholarship, unveiled a new piece, a small steel plaque reading, "Roots hold when gold flakes blow away." I felt our baby kick, as if applauding. The studio hummed with music grinders, heartbeats proof that scale can honor soul when community writes the blueprints. Our story isn't a fairy tale of perfect arcs. It's a bridge under constant load, inspected, daily repaired, when cracks appear, strengthened by every traveler who dares walk across believing art and labor can share the same scaffold. August drifted in with a hush that made Gulf Coast old-timers glance at the sky, the way welders inspect a seam they don't trust. And by the first weekend, the Weather Bureau posted a watch on a spiraling system named Hurricane Dahlia, still 200 miles out, but moving with the intent of a swung hammer. Houston residents lined hardware aisles, while the Forge clanged overtime preparing emergency railings for senior center ramps. Yet every radio update carried the same refrain: landfall, likely within 72 hours, strength unpredictable but serious. I was 34 weeks pregnant, belly round as a polished acetylene tank, and every kick from the child we'd nicknamed Bean felt like a countdown reminding me that birth and catastrophe both arrive on their own timetables. The overpass our students built had quietly become part of the city's evacuation grid, a steel sunflower stem guiding foot traffic toward higher ground. So Mason organized a 48-hour stress test. He and union crews inspected welds, bolted temporary wind bracing, and installed slip-resistant plates, while Joelle, home from her first engineering semester, ran wind load simulations on a laptop balanced atop a milk crate. Gomez set the stadium as a volunteer hub. Mom brewed industrial vats of coffee. Pierce coded a real-time sensor dashboard, and Dad no longer tailored but undeniably resolute fetched water and lugged sandbags without complaint. Dahlia accelerated overnight. By dawn Monday, it upgraded to Category 3 eye-angled, straight for Galveston. Evacuation orders rippled, and the Forge's parking lot transformed into a supply depot where retirees welded quick-assemble cot frames and teenagers silk-screened wayfinding arrows onto scrap aluminum. Blair's mobile clinic rolled in distributing insulin and calming nerves. She stationed me at intake tables with orders to stay seated, but adrenaline tingled in my fingertips like live wire. Mason noticed, knelt, and spoke in that gravel-soft tone bridges stand because they flex cariño. So do families. We'll bend, not break. At noon, the outer bands arrived, wind-whipped drizzle that smelled of salt and tension. Power flickered, but held. Dad checked the overpass sensor's deflection within safe tolerance. He exhaled gratitude like a man paying off a long debt. Midnight ushered the full brunt rain horizontal transformers, popping blue Corona's oak branches, hurtling like javelins. Inside the Forge, the roof roared, yet held but at 01:17. A rust-weakened skylight blew, sending shards skittering across concrete. Apprentices herded evacuees deeper into the welding bay, and the generator kicked in with a cough and a growl. I felt a contraction, then sharp, undeniable Bean, announcing a different arrival schedule. Blair hurried over, pulse steady, though eyes wide, confirming early labor. Water still unbroken dilation, modest, but stress could accelerate things. The clinic van couldn't navigate flooded streets, and ambulances were overwhelmed, so contingency plan activated. Mom sterilized the small break room. Silas fetched clean towels, and Mason squeezed my hand until knuckles matched torch sparks. Contractions paced at 10 minutes, then 8. But Dahlia's eye wall neared. Barometric pressure dropped so fast ears popped. A volunteer monitoring sensors shouted the western retaining wall of the bayou threatened breach. If it failed, floodwater would funnel straight toward the stadium and our makeshift shelter. The only fast fix redirect flow via the new overpass's drainage channels, but those gates were still bolted because code inspectors hadn't cleared them. Mason cursed, kissed my forehead, and sprinted with Dad Joelle and 2 welders into rain that felt like gravel. I wrestled another contraction, Blair timing Mom whispering strength stories from when she birthed me during a tropical storm decades earlier. On the sensor feed Pierce projected onto the wall, I watched Mason's helmet light bob across the bridge walkway. Wind shoved torrents over guardrails, but the sunflower plates held firm. They reached the drainage ports, cut locking pins with battery grinders, swung gates wide, and water diverted like a river discovering a canyon. The breach risk dropped. Green numbers replaced red. Cheers erupted inside, though thunder muted them. Relief washed through me. Then my water broke a warm rush, grounding me to the moment. Labor escalated, each wave fierce. I clutched the edge of a steel workbench, absurdly grateful for its solidity. Blair guided me through breathing patterns while Mom mopped sweat. Pierce killed the sensor feed to grant privacy, though later he'd admit the modem shorted anyway. Time blurred at 03:41. Mason returned soaked but safe kneeling, so our foreheads met. I felt salt from rain and tears. At 0406, amid generator hum and distant sirens, Bean entered the world wailing strong. Blair declared a healthy son, 10 fingers, 10 toes lungs, robust enough to compete with grinders. We named him River Calder Ruiz after the water that threatened and the bridge that protected after flow and strength and family lines reforged. Dawn broke pale pink clouds, shredded dahlia, limping inland toward pine woods. Damage reports trickled downed lines, uprooted trees, but the overpass stood unscarred, its sensors posting stable readings. City engineers tweeted praise, and photos of sunflowers glistening under stormlight went viral hope amid havoc. Afternoon sunshine revealed wreckage, yet also resilience, neighbors hauling debris, welders patching roofs, students painting Estamos Bien on plywood. The forge lost one skylight, but gained a birth story no marketing agency could invent. In the following weeks, River's crib lived in my office corner, lullabies harmonizing with MIG pops. Donations soared from viewers moved by storm footage, enabling roof upgrades and scholarship expansion. Even Horizon Works, eager to repair image, sent crates of solar panels. Dad organized volunteer crews to retrofit low-income homes with flood vents, calling it penance work. Mom taught weld bead basics to grandmothers who had never held power tools. Blair's clinic received municipal funding. Pierce's open-source sensor network scaled citywide, earning him an innovation grant once unimaginable. One evening in September, we gathered on the Overpass Family Students Council members to install a final plaque, Storms Test, Bridges Tell. Joelle tightened the last bolt, while dusk ignited the skyline. River gurgled in Mason's arms, tiny fist grasping his father's welding glove. I stepped forward, stomach still tender, heart fuller than any ledger, and spoke into the quiet. We began as a cautionary tale, but storms melted the dross and left us tempered. This bridge isn't just steel and art. It's proof we can design futures that hold. Applause mingled with cricket chatter. Dad wiped a tear. Mom's smile wrinkled like wind-smoothed metal. In the distance, construction cranes pivoted, but for once they seemed less ominous, more like pencils sketching possibility on sky. Back at the studio, Mason locked up River asleep against his chest. I traced weld seams glowing under exit lights, each bead a frozen flame, each joint a reminder that integrity is earned, bead by bead, apology by apology, choice by choice. Outside, the bayou's waterline glittered under moonlight, lower now, thanks to drainage gates that would bear Joelle's name on engineering brochures. The air smelled of wet earth and wild jasmine. Cicadas droned a lullaby. Mason whispered that River would crawl these floors before he walked marble halls, and I answered that whichever path he chose, he'd know both paintbrush and wrench. As we drove home, the truck bumped over patched streets, headlights catching murals blooming on storm-scarred walls, sunflowers sprouting from concrete like reminders that beauty can be infrastructure too. I realized I no longer flinched at the word legacy. It no longer meant trust funds and club plaques. It meant a city safer art, brighter, a family honest enough to withstand audits and hurricanes alike. And if another storm targets Houston, it will find bridges waiting, designed by young minds who learned that iron bending with purpose can outshine gold leaf every time. River stirred, then settled the steady rumble of the engine sinking with his breath. And I rested my head on Mason's shoulder, knowing the forge would still hum tomorrow, sparks dancing stories, unfurling roots, gripping deeper with every pass of the torch.